understand you're in need of some advice.
Hey beautiful, welcome into Dr. Sarah's Cafe. This is your weekly refill where we take our time to savor the flavor of the week, which is a unique specialty blend of astrology, tarot, oracle cards, poetry, and lots of creativity and intuition. Happy Black History Month to all of you who celebrate in the month of February. This is going to be a really deep video. I have 2 oracle cards, 2 tarot cards, and an extended to-go or takeaway, which is really a journal activity that I'm going to walk you through at the end. So please use the timestamps in the description box to skip ahead to the sections that interest you the most, because I want to, again, take my time walking you through the various ingredients and components that make up this unique flavor, which is, for this week, revision your story. Revision your story. I have taught a revision workshop lots of time. It is a workshop that uses writing as part of the healing process. And so we know that to revise, or that the act of revision, whether it's writing or a play or a film or anything, a painting or piece of artwork, means to change it so that it is better, so that it is more aligned with the original idea that you had in your head, right? Or it's more pleasing and more impactful to the audience. Revision. This means thinking about seeing ourselves, understanding ourselves, imagining ourselves a new story, a more healed story. And not just story as in where we've been, where we've come from, who we are now, but revisioning the story of where we're headed, the future that we want to create. And that's the vision part of revision. So writing new narratives about who we are, and then creating a new vision about where we're going. Of course, rooted in where we've been. Okay, so let's jump into the ingredients. As I mentioned, we're going deep. And so get comfortable and grab your favorite warm mug of cocoa, coffee, or tea, and let's dive right in. We're going to start with the first oracle card. So I pulled an oracle card, and this one was at the bottom of the deck. And it feels like what really drove the flavor of the week for me as an overarching oracle energy, which is the storyteller, number 17. And this is from the Oracle of the Seven Energies deck. The storyteller card in this deck, it's all about the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. It's all about the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. And not just the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, but the stories that we tell or reflect out to the world. So when someone asks you, who are you? How are you likely to answer that? When someone says, tell me about yourself, I actually have an interview coming up, and one of the dreaded interview questions is, so tell me a little bit about yourself, because where do we start? Where do we begin? And this card speaks to not just understanding and recognizing our primary core stories about ourselves, but it's also about rewriting better stories, writing the story that feels most aligned with who we desire to be, where our soul feels like it's being led towards. And with this being the first week of Black History Month, it feels really appropriate to think not just our individual stories, but our collective stories. Whatever it means for you, when you say that word, my people, my family, my culture, my nation, my tribe, my community, my neighborhood, thinking about what have been the narratives, what have been the stories, really guiding the outcomes and really guiding the way we've lived our lives. And maybe sometimes there's been conflict between the story you have of yourself and the story of your people. And maybe there's misalignment. Maybe there's incongruence there that has made you feel like an outcast, that has made you feel like an outsider, right? When people say, oh, this is the story of who we are as a people, and maybe your soul, your spirit didn't feel that way, didn't align with that. And so you now, as an adult, I'm assuming everyone watching this is an adult, have the agency to say, that was the story that my family, my community, my culture, my neighborhood, my country told me I had to live up to. But I'm going to make, again, my own sovereign choice to revision my own story, to write a story that is more true and authentic to my soul's purpose, whether it be perfectly aligned with the greater macro narratives of larger groups that I belong to, or whether it be completely opposed to those larger macro narratives about the groups that I belong to. You in your soul know what the authentic story really is. The stories that we tell ourselves have such an immediate impact, such a profound impact on our lived reality, and I want to focus on that and make sure we all understand that it's not just storytelling for the sake of escapism, for the sake of fun. Oh, that was a nice story, and then we move on to the real world. No, this oracle card reminds us that the stories we tell shape our quote unquote real world. They shape our reality. And I'm also thinking about one of my sayings that I use in my other line of work, which is that representation matters because the way people are represented determines the way people are treated. And when we look at larger cultural narratives, when we look at society-wide narratives about who's worthy, about who's valuable, about whose life matters, that has historically determined the way society, the way the law, the way the government treats those people. If the story about a group of people is that they don't belong, if the story about a group of people is that they are bad or criminal or that they are lazy, then the larger society will respond to them based on that story. Individually, we have to write narratives that feel empowered, narratives that feel healing, that feel affirmative of the best of who we could be. But again, it goes without saying, it just feels too aligned during these first couple of days of Black History Month, not to acknowledge that we also can participate in rewriting the narratives and revising that sense of cultural identity as well. That's part of the healing work. That's part of the justice work. That's part of the sustainability work. For those of you who love the environment and who mourn and lament the destruction that has been caused on the environment, you know why humans have so easily destroyed the earth is because of the cultural narratives we have about the earth. Right? The cultural narrative that the earth is to be mined and used to our benefit without care or concern for her, right? Or for it. And someone's narrative about the earth being less than, someone's narrative that animals are less than, someone's narrative that the planet is an infinite resource that doesn't feel pain. Their actions and the way they interact with the earth is going to reflect that narrative or reflect that story. And we can know what narrative someone is operating under by the actions that they take and by the way they treat us, by the way they treat other people, by the way they treat their home, themselves, the earth. We see what narratives they have about all those things, okay? We can't control or worry about other people's thoughts and ideas and opinions. The immediate work for this week is digging in to really discover what are our narratives. And I'm saying this now because we assume, myself included, that we always have the right narrative about the world, about society, about other people. And I'm challenging all of us to just question, to just be willing to reflect, to be willing to ask, is this the best narrative to have about myself? Is this the best narrative to use to engage with the natural world? Is this the best narrative to have as I mother my children or my pets or my plants? Is this the best narrative to have as I go out into the world as a citizen in my neighborhood? I think that's healthy. And our hope is that the answer is yes, but more importantly, our hope is that that line of questioning leads us to a better version of ourselves, a better version of our relationships, and a better version of our world. And I think that requires that everyone sustain an ongoing practice of reviewing and revising where necessary the stories that we use to guide our life. So that was the card at the bottom of the deck. Now the card that actually fell out was number 21, exposed and revealed. And I was not going to use this card at first because I was using my rational mind. Okay. I was using my rational mind and saying, I'm not really feeling it. No. But once I continued putting together the pieces and blending the ingredients for this flavor of the week, I was brought back to this card that I had actually gone so far as to insert back into the deck, right? And I had to, my newsletter for the week for last week was I was wrong. And in this case, I was wrong. I was like, let me go back and get that oracle card because my spirit guides were like, this is an important ingredient for the flavor of the week. It might not make rational sense, but just trust that when all the pieces come together, when all the flavors come together, they create something unique and specific that the community needs now. So exposed and revealed in this Oracle of the Seven Energies Oracle deck is all about shame. And the clarity about why this card was paired with the storyteller card. The stories that were delivered to us early in our lives. This is reminding me a lot about the last Tuesday tarot reading. The stories that the adults and the caregivers and the community, the culture, the family around us, the society around us, those stories oftentimes create shame in our lives. Most of us have experienced, been the subject of, or even written stories for ourselves that were sources of shame, that created shame. You are not enough. You're never going to find anyone who loves you because of these personality traits or because of these physical traits. The stories of you can't dream too big because that's not possible for people like you. Or someone did a bad thing to you in the past, and because of that, you're always going to be broken. You have less value in the culture because of any number of things. And so these stories, these narratives, big, small, micro, macro, oftentimes are stories of shame. And so this card is actually very necessary as we do the work of revising our stories, is specifically where we feel the most shame is where we need the most revised narrative. It's where we most need a new story. Yes, that feels like it's sufficient just to say that. And a lot of times we struggle with healing our shame because we can't even acknowledge that shame is being felt, that there is shame in this situation or within this relationship or within this context. And so exposed and revealed is a necessary process, the courage to be able to look at your stories and say, this story has created a lot of emotional and psychological pain for me. And it's created a lot of shame, and it's held me back from living fully, from blossoming into all of the greatness that I really contain. And sometimes we can share our stories, and in sharing those stories, we help to ease. It's almost like a soothing balm for the shame of other people who witness it. So if I share my story of shame, pain, hurt, not in a voyeuristic way, but in a witnessing way, then that can open up space in someone else who hears my story to face their own shame. Yeah. And so maybe, some of us might be blessed with community, with family, with a friend, with a therapist who can bear witness to our stories that have brought us the greatest shame in our life. And as part of the healing process, some might find that in sharing that story with the larger audience, not only does it continue to help heal our own shame, but that we create an opportunity, we create a space, we co-create a moment for collective healing, for others to receive some healing by feeling seen. Feeling seen can feel very vulnerable because of the potential for shame. Okay? And I let my intuition speak to me as I'm creating the program, the slides, the images, putting together all the ingredients. But I also let my intuition guide me as I'm speaking, as I'm recording the video. You might call it channeling, you might just call it downloads or intuition, insight, wisdom, whatever label we put on it. I leave space. I leave space open for receiving not just the pre-planned outline that I created also through intuition and creative inspiration, but also in the moment as I'm revisiting the material that I put together. And the thing that came through really strongly now, and if my demeanor seems different, it's because it feels emotional, right? Like I feel like there's a lot of emotion, and I'm trying to steady it in my body and in my voice. And looking at this image, exposed and revealed the parts that we try the most to hide. If these people knew this about me, they wouldn't love me anymore, right? Or if people see this side of me, they won't accept me anymore. But with this image, I feel so strongly that your spirit guides, your angels, your ancestors want you to know okay. Why is it so hard to say? That they see you. They see all of you. They see parts of you that you have yet to see yourself. And they love all of it. They see you, really see you more than any of us could ever imagine. And they love you in ways that humanity has yet to fully experience. And they want you to try to find some comfort in that. That even when you're afraid to really see yourself or see parts of yourself, they are holding space for even those parts and holding them in love. In their eyes, in their gaze, there is only love. I always laugh after I cry on camera. And I'm not one of those people who's afraid to cry on camera. I'm a sap. Okay. Cry, commercials, whatever. But I'm laughing because, right, like speaking about exposed and revealed. Yeah, I don't know who watching this, might currently be in a moment where you feel unlovable. You feel like you just can't quite reach or achieve or accomplish the right amount of whatever it takes to finally feel good enough to be okay with who you are, who you really are, of course, goes without saying. Yeah. Whew. Okay. Let's continue on, shall we? Very inspiring cards. We got two that fell out together, the Magician and the Sun. Okay? This is the African tarot deck. So the Sun is that warmth, that vitality, that clarity, that joy, that dancing in the sunlight, that also exposure, right? Exposed and revealed, shining the spotlight on those stories, on those narratives, on the things that we have been ashamed of the things that we're still ashamed of. And when you revise, for those of you who are creatives, I know some of you write poetry or write essays or stories or other things, or maybe you're an artist or a photographer, and you know that the process of revising your work, like going back and reviewing it that second time, is like the sun, the light bulb, and you see it differently. You're like, oh, I didn't see that error before. I didn't see that typo. I didn't notice that I had left out a word, right? So there's this also clarity that comes with revision. When you see more clearly, you see more broadly, you see more deeply. And the Magician, it's my dog. It's my dog. It's my homie. It's my ace. I mean, literally, the Magician is the number one. I love the Magician card because it is the card of creative possibility, creative willpower. And you talk about someone who can write a good narrative, honey. You're talking about someone who can deliver a powerhouse speech. Someone who could paint. Are you seeing his hand, the wand? It's giving paintbrush, okay? It's giving paintbrush. I mean, he can paint a pretty picture. And he may or may not be able to predict the weather. The Magician is at the height of his or her game, okay? And they're like, I know that if I can vision it, if I can imagine it, I have the tools, I have the resources, I have the will, I have the creativity, I have the ingenuity, I have the inventiveness, I have the power to make it happen, to manifest, to materialize, to create the thing I imagine. And so these tarot cards fill me with so much hope regarding this particular flavor of the week. Spirit is not just asking you, your creator, the divine, the universe, God. Let me know in the comments what word you prefer. I kind of like them all, which is why I often repeat them in succession like that, or in sequence. But Spirit wants you to know, we're not just going to give you an assignment without giving you everything you need to complete the assignment. Honey, let me say it again. Let me say it again. Spirit wants you to know, they're not just going to give you an assignment for the day, for your life, without giving you every single thing you need to complete the assignment with flying colors, with flourish, okay, with flair, with your own unique signature. And this magician in the sun is telling us that. It's time to revise our stories, whether it be me alone in my own little bubble of a world, whether it be the story of my family, my state, my neighborhood, my street, the block that I live on, my country, my race, my gender, my all the things. It's time to write new narratives that inspire us, write new narratives about our magic, write new narratives from a place of clarity and empowerment, because we've dealt with, we've looked at, we've healed the shame, and now we can celebrate all that we are and see that all of who we are is the best of who we are. For some of you, storytelling in a more literal sense really is one of your spiritual gifts. For some of you, even if it's not literal storytelling, you have gifts. Oh, honey, if you're watching this, if you exist in the world, you have spiritual gifts. But I suspect that if you're watching this, you are open and receptive to recognizing and using your spiritual gifts. And there's something special there. If you're watching this, with you understanding, acknowledging, recognizing the ways that you are uniquely gifted, whether it be painting, drawing, speaking, dancing, being a really gifted encourager. One of my friends, I tell her all the time, I said, you have the gift of encouragement. You have the gift of edification, right? And you can tell it's almost like she's struck with a message and she delivers it like clearly, succinctly, without even thinking about it. And it's the exact message you needed to hear with all the encouragement and edification. She's like a professional spiritual cheerleader. And I don't even know if she really, really knows it, right? So your gift doesn't have to be something traditional like singing or writing or dancing. Maybe your gift is the gift of holding emotional space. Maybe your gift is the gift of knowing when someone needs a hug. Maybe you have the gift of knowing when someone needs to open up, when someone needs, a warm meal, right? So think about all the things that seem to come naturally to you, the things that really grab your interest and your attention. Even if you have to work at it, you are dedicated to working at it. What are the things that you enjoy doing, right? And not just doing for other people, but just doing in general. There's something really important there this week as you revision your story, okay? There's something really important there, even when you feel exposed and revealed. Right now in this moment, I'm seeing the connection. Many of us do not step fully into our power because we're afraid of being exposed and revealed. We're afraid of feeling that shame from having our talents exposed. So to the extent that we lean fully into our spiritual gifts, into our talents and our roles and our purpose and our destiny, we risk exposure. We risk being revealed to others and to ourselves. And that can be really scary. But I'm telling you, the message that Spirit wants me to harp on this week is that we have to do this healing work. We have to learn to fill our cups, to heal those shameful narratives and stories, to revise new, empowered, authentic, true stories for ourselves, so that we remove the obstacles, we remove the veil that has obscured or limited or diminished our true power and our true gifts. It's a time in our collective experience where we need each other to be in touch with our power, with our magic, with our gifts. There's a lot of concern, a lot of fear, a lot of worry about the world right now. And what I've been feeling, but what I'm also seeing now in this message coming through, it's very clearly as a knowing, is that, the talk about how we survive the next 4 years, how we make it through the next 4 years. Honey, this is it. What am I called to do? What is my soul's purpose? Because that is going to lead to solutions. That is going to create protection. That is going to create pathways and channels to the society that we all deserve. So revisioning what we want for the future of humanity requires that we do our part within humanity to create that future. Okay? I hope that's clear. I hope I've said it well enough that it lands well with you. Okay. Next, we have the Pastry and Poetry for the week, which is brought to us by a very special edition of Pastry and Poetry. It's the Black History Month edition. We got to go all the way back to the 1700s and pay homage to your girl, Mrs. Phyllis Wheatley Peters. Okay. One of the first African-American poets to be published. She was well known. She was actually really popular among literate Americans and internationally as well. And at the time, the narrative, the story of all Black people around the world was that they were incapable of creating beautiful, intelligent, intellectual prose or poetry or artwork, right? The narrative was that Black people, that my ancestors, that perhaps your ancestors, if you also identify as Black, that they did not have capacity for poetry or for much else outside of menial labor and hard labor and things dealing with physical brute strength. And so Phyllis Wheatley, going back to the message I just gave about doing your soul's purpose, by simply following her own internal call to create, she not only had to rewrite a narrative about herself, but she knowingly or unknowingly, purposely or accidentally, or collaterally, helped to rewrite a collective narrative, a social narrative, right? Now, it would take lots of other people a long time, right? She didn't do it by herself, but simply by being herself and being in her lane, being in her bag, okay? Following that creative impulse inside of herself. She changed the narrative not only of who she was, but she changed the narrative of who an entire group of people was, or she was a part of, right? Like ushering in a new understanding of ourselves as Black people. I'm going to read an excerpt from one of her poems. I'll read it, and of course, I'll explain, unpack why I think it's really appropriate as we reflect on this flavor of the week. To show the laboring bosom's deep intent, and thought and living characters to paint, when first thy pencil did these beauties give, and breathing figures learnt from thee to live, how did those prospects give my soul delight, a new creation rushing on my sight? Still, wondrous youth, each noble path pursue, on deathless glories fix thine ardent view. Still may the painter's and the poet's fire to aid thy pencil and thy verse conspire. And may the charms of each seraphic theme conduct thy footsteps to immortal fame. High to the blissful wonders of the skies, elate thy soul and raise thy wishful eyes. It felt good to read that. Kind of invoking our ancestor here, right? Calling in our ancestors. Every day, all year long, but especially more potently because of the collective focus during Black History Month. And so this poem is about being inspired to create, letting yourself be inspired to create, and how when you follow that inspiration, there's sort of a cosmic support for ushering it in. And I really like the line, when first thy pencil did those beauties give, and breathing figures learnt from thee to live, right? So there's like an idea. In this instance, it's a painting. And so the images that you paint, they learn to live through you, right? Like you breathe life into your painting. You breathe life into your dance, your choreography. You breathe life into your words that you put on a page. You breathe life into the meals that you cook. You breathe life into the fabrics that you sew together to create a garment, right? It is through your hands, your tools, your creativity, your inventiveness that you give life to the thing that you're creating. I also like the line, still may the painter's and the poet's fire to aid thy pencil and thy verse conspire, right? And so it's like this spiritual assistance, this spiritual help that comes from that, that sacral desire to create. And it's funny that she says fire, because creativity is ruled by the sacral chakra and the solar plexus, right? And in many cases, the root chakra as well. And those are very fiery chakras. And then lastly, the line, a new creation rushing on my sight. So this is her experience of witnessing the painting for the first time by an African painter specifically. So this poem speaks to that, right? So you have an African-American woman acknowledging the creative artwork of another African painter. And the line, a new creation rushing on my sight. And I feel this for art, the inspiration to create, but also witnessing a new piece of art. But I also really strongly feel this for our culture, for our society, for our world, right? Like a new creation rushing on my sight. Of course, I think mostly we focus on things like new technology, like phones, computers, AI. But I'm also thinking about a new way of doing community, a new way of building communal spaces, a new form of architecture that addresses homelessness in your city, right? Like those kinds of new creations as well, whether they be feats of engineering that provide sustenance to more people while using less resources, right? Like so many things that we can create. The astrology. So February 3rd, we have Mercury in Aquarius, trine Jupiter in Gemini. So this is really nice. We have two air sign energies trining each other. Jupiter, of course, is always a great planet to have an aspect with, let's be honest. But especially a positive, supportive aspect like a trine to another generally decent planet, right? It's not considered one of the benefic planets, but it's also certainly not one of the malefic planets either, okay? So a positive, happy aspect between one really happy, jolly planet as well as one sort of sometimes, really chatty, flighty planet. The other thing about Jupiter, though, besides the fact that it wants to give us blessings and wants us to feel good and be happy, Jupiter is about the story. Jupiter rules the ninth house of Sagittarius. Jupiter is about the adventure story, right? It's like I'm going on this adventure and then I have a great tale to tell you when I get back, right? And so it goes and collects all these stories from around the world, from different people, and it comes back and it says, this is what it all means. This is the philosophy that we take from all this information. Whereas Mercury is more so the news story. It's more so the report. It has the details, it has the facts, but Jupiter is where those facts and details come together to make up a story. Does that make sense? So Mercury is like, oh, here's all the pieces and the elements, and let's do all the research. And Jupiter is like, yes, and let's make that research and turn it into a dissertation. Let's turn it into a book that has a complete thesis with like organization and structure. So those two planets being in a trine this week, it's definitely giving storyteller energy. Jupiter is technically still retrograde as well, so that's where that revision comes in, but it's about to go direct though. It's like going direct the next day. And so it's like saying, let's take one last look. Let's give it one more once over before we submit the final essay or application or story. I love this. I love this for the energy of revising the story, revising your story, revising our cultural narratives. Again, Mercury being the actual writing, Jupiter being the publication and the broadcasting. So Mercury would be the process of writing the script, and Jupiter would be broadcasting the movie to the masses, right? Mercury, again, is like the research and let's collect all the pieces. And Jupiter is like, oh, here are the findings, and we're going to collate the findings to create a really compelling thesis statement, right? So, and the trine being that positive, supportive aspect, like a lot of us might be telling actual stories, like real writing, like real narratives, real broadcasting, real research, and like just really either enjoying it or having it be really effective. As I mentioned, the very next day, Jupiter turns direct in Gemini. Y'all have been waiting. I know. Y'all been waiting for Jupiter to go direct because y'all want them blessings to come raining back in. Now, I was born with Jupiter retrograde in my chart natally, so I actually saw a nice infusion of blessings when Jupiter turned retrograde. It'll be interesting to see now that it's direct again, what comes of those things. But on that same day, Venus moves into the sign of Aries. Now, Venus and Jupiter, they're both benefic planets, but they're both in detriment in these signs, right? So Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini, and Venus is in detriment in Aries. So for a few weeks, at least, we have both of our most loving, gift-giving planets not feeling their best. They're kind of like under the weather, right? They are not at peak performance in these signs, but they're there and they're still themselves. They're still doing what they can in terms of bringing beauty and abundance and joy and luck and pleasure to that area of our lives, okay? Now on February 7th, we have Neptune conjunct the North Node in Pisces, and then Venus and Aries sextile Pluto in Aquarius. So Neptune conjunct the North Node in Pisces. Neptune rules Pisces, and so Neptune and Pisces are both very nebulous, otherworldly, abstract energies. But conjunct the North Node, it gives us that vision, that creative vision, that spark. And I'm pointing to my third eye. I guess just kind of like an intuitive gesture that I'm making. But the North Node, if you watch my North Node in Pisces video, I'll link to it in the description box below, is about the destiny point. It is where we're headed, what we're focusing on, where we're evolving to, what we're growing into, what we're blossoming and blooming towards, that future vision, right? And so Neptune in Pisces, I think will help us imagine a greater destiny, will help us imagine and use our gifts of fantasy to say, what if? What are the possibilities with this North Node energy? Where could we go with this? Yeah, I love it. And then Venus in Aries, sextile Pluto and Aquarius. A lot of people talk about Venus and Aries being, one example I heard was the Sandra Dee at the end of Grease. So not her character throughout the movie where she's shy and she's like not really into it, but at the end of the movie when she's wearing like stiletto heels and a black leather coat and she's got her hair all spiked up, like Venus and Aries is like aggressive with her love and like her sexuality, right? And then sextile Pluto, which is also like a planet that's kind of, you know, it could be a very creative day in many ways. I'll just leave it at that. And then on the February 9th, we have the Sun conjunct Mercury in Aquarius and Mars in Cancer, trine Saturn in Pisces. So Sun conjunct Mercury in Aquarius, again, Mercury being like, what are we saying? What are we communicating? Right? And so if I have a story about myself, how am I communicating that to other people? So conjunct the Sun, which is the self, the identity, the sovereign, this could very well be communication about who we are, who we want to be, especially in the future, right? Because Aquarius is that long-term vision, long-term hopes and wishes. So the Sun conjunct Mercury, remember we had the Sun card in our tarot portion. Our tarot ingredient included the Sun card with the Magician. And the Magician is Mercury. Now that I think about it, in this moment, it's occurring to me like, ding. We have the Sun and Mercury in tarot. And on February 9th, we have the Sun and Mercury in a conjunction. Okay, because the Magician card represents Mercury. So the Sun and Mercury might be a significant transit for this flavor of the week. This week, let's pay attention. Let's see what comes of it. And journaling. Mercury is about, again, scribe. It's very like scribe-like. See what comes up for you. And also that same day, Mars and Cancer trine the Sun and Saturn. So even though Mars and Saturn are considered malefic, meaning not comfortable, friendly planets, they're making a positive aspect towards each other. It's like two fighters becoming allies to achieve a greater purpose, okay? Now, Mars and Saturn, even though they're considered malefic planets, they are very helpful. Like we need that energy in our lives as well. So Mars working in harmony and supporting Saturn and vice versa, Saturn working in harmony and supporting Mars. This is our drive, our grit, our fight, our stamina for the long term to say, I can do this, we can do this, we can buckle in, and we can make this happen. And we are going to cultivate whatever internal fire, muster up whatever internal strength and endurance and perseverance and patience and assertiveness that we need to put that vision into practice. You hear me? We're going to give that vision, take it out of the Neptune, Pisces, imaginary realms. And with Mars trine Saturn, we're going to give it a foundation, right? We're going to have an action plan. We're going to know what role we need to play and who else needs to play what role. We're going to find in our physical bodies, in our physical world, a way to concretize and build that vision. It's a big week. It's a big week. Let's end with a very special to-go or takeaway. I hope you stayed till the end because I have a journal prompt that I want you to do. Usually my to-go or takeaway is just a quote or an affirmation, but this week, because, we went deep this week, we really dove in, unpacked a lot. I'm giving us a more active and intentional activity that we can do to integrate all the things that I've been sharing. So get your journal. Get your notebook. The first thing I want you to do is to journal on the self-narratives that have directed your path in the past. So the first thing you're going to write about in your journal, What have been the core stories, the stories that have influenced my choices, influenced my decisions, that have impacted the way I move through the world, the way I show up in rooms or not? Maybe not showing up in a room is the result of a story from the past, right? So take some time to do that. You can do this all in one day, or you can, do that and then come back the next day for part 2. But the second thing is I want you to read what you wrote, okay? And then cross out the narratives and the stories you no longer want to keep. And highlight, underline, circle ones that feel good to you now, if any. Don't worry if none of them feel good now. Don't worry if you don't like any of them. If you want to cross them all out, that's perfectly fine. But just in case there are some stories and narratives you have that you've recorded and written down, circle those, highlight those, okay? And then step 3, on a new page, start a fresh page, because you're going to need the space, but it's also symbolic, right? Starting fresh on a brand new slate. Write the ones that you highlighted, if any, okay? And you're going to add more stories, more narratives that feel good to you now. What's a story about you that feels good now? What's a story about your world that feels good to you now? What's a story about Earth and your relationship to Earth that feels good to you now? Keep in mind that this is just a draft. This is not the final story. You are free to do as many revisions as you want at any time in your life. Okay? It's always in draft mode as long as we're alive. The story that we're writing is always a work in progress. It's always in draft mode. And that can be comforting in knowing that you are always free to revise. You're always free to cross it out. You're always free to elaborate. You're always free to dig deeper, to unpack, to keep writing, to stop writing, to erase, to underline. You're always free to completely scrap the entire thing and start fresh on a new page. With that, my dears, I hope that this weekly refill in particular has helped you in some way to refill your spiritual cup. And I hope to see you in another video. Take care. Much love.
You can say that I'm crazy, that you're thinking